Welcome to another episode of Music Therapy. I am your mental health therapist, John Thune, and today we are listening to Chapter 3 by REN. If you have any other songs you want to see me react to, please drop them in the comments. Be sure to like, subscribe, share this with a friend. It helps me a ton. And let's get right into Chapter 3. The first two chapters are also available in my previous uploads if you want to start in chronological order. It is intense.
My therapist was scowling at my weekly anxiety and depression scores like a detective trying to crack a particularly stubborn case. There were no signs of improvement, and the scores followed no real measurable pattern that were consistent with bipolar. After nearly 2 years of talk therapy and taking enough medications to fill a pharmacy, he sat down with me and he dropped the bombshell that he didn't think that I had bipolar. In fact, he said that he didn't think that I had depression at all. And it was a very odd thing to be stripped of an identity in an instant. The reality was that a 20-minute in-and-out consultation 2 years ago led to 2 years of swallowing pills that I never needed and devoting so much of my time to managing the condition that I never actually had.
Wow, yeah, I used to work with this really experienced sage nurse, and she said if you have 3 or more mental health diagnoses, they're all wrong, and you need to start from scratch because there are criteria for different diagnoses that are shared, and if they're shared and you hit the criteria for bipolar, depression, anxiety, then maybe you don't have either of those. Maybe you have something completely different, and it's so important to constantly evaluate these methods that assess you for disorders because they're not perfect, and a lot of them are self-referral, self-filled out, and they can be highly misleading.
The emotions inside me swirled around like a mismatched soup. On one hand, I was full of anger and I was bitter about the whole situation, but I was also hopeful that this new path could offer me the relief that I desperately needed. He told me he was going to refer me to an ME clinic in Bath. I'd never heard of it before, but instinctively true to character, I started researching it online as soon as I got home. Apparently, ME is the medical equivalent of a choose-your-own-adventure book, with tiredness as the only consistent plotline. There were no universally accepted reasons as to why the fuck it existed in the first place. It seemed it was largely accepted to be a post-viral condition, but that was all speculative because there were no clear consensus in the medical community what ME even was. The defining characteristic was a tiredness that wouldn't go away with rest. I could relate to this. In fact, I could more than relate to it.
Wow, another misdiagnosis, and this is the problem with our healthcare industry is we are constantly putting people in a box trying to diagnose them. When people aren't, you can't put an entire person and their complexity within a box. It just doesn't work. We're so infinite and expansive, and when you put someone in a box, you subconsciously look for those symptoms and confine who they are to that. And that's what Ren has been through, has been put in these boxes that he doesn't belong in. And it's so rough when you attach a part of your identity to having like bipolar or depression or ME, and then to find out you don't, and that they're completely wrong, and that the experts completely misguided you.
This, in fact, I could more than relate to it. For anyone lucky enough to not have experienced this, if you want an idea of what it's like, force yourself to stay awake for 3 nights in a row. During this time, eat the food that makes you feel terrible, and in this sleep-deprived state, exercise until your muscles give out. By the 3rd day, you'll have a small insight into living with this condition. During the years post-stem cell transplant, where I recovered a lot of my health and functionality, I remember getting COVID and thinking it was a walk in the park compared to the first year of my illness. The difference was COVID lasted about a week. The thick of my illness lasted 8 years, and it only was getting worse. I pinned a lot of hope on going to that first visit at the ME clinic. It was a 6-month waiting list, God bless NHS wait times, but I felt excited to be surrounded by people who would understand me, where I could climb out of this nightmare. But my hopes were pretty quickly crushed during that first visit.
Oh, geez. So he's now in a support group for another misdiagnosis where it's the common factor is tiredness, and that is going to be rough for him to be a part of. Even though groups are great at making you feel like you're not alone, if you're in the wrong group, it's going to make you feel more alone. And if a group is lonely for you, odds are you're in the wrong group, you're in the wrong business, you're in the wrong peer-to-peer consultation. because they should be fulfilling.
I remember walking into a space that looked like a disused classroom where a bunch of people on chairs were sitting around in circles like Alcoholics Anonymous. I could feel a sense of camaraderie and that we all felt like dog shit. We were all confused and we were all desperately wanting to feel better. I believe
That's the power of groups.
at the time I was probably the youngest in the group. The group leader waddled in and handed us all a booklet that looked like a school timetable. She then sat us down and told about this new revolutionary technique called pacing, where you write down and track everything that you do in the day, and then you do it less. And then with time, do it more again. The theory being that you have a limited bucket of energy compared to normal people, and you need to protect that and gradually push it. I thought this sounded pretty stupid, so I raised my hand. I told her about the pain in my body. I told her that my muscles twitched constantly. I told her that my bones ached. I told her that my mouth was dry. I couldn't focus. That some days they'd be without mercy and I'd be trapped in bed for the whole day. But the days that I wasn't, I wanted to make the most of it. I wanted to breathe the air and I wanted to live. She told me she understood it's hard, but she didn't really offer more than that. She just pointed at the booklet and told me to follow it. I asked her about things like heavy metal poisoning, about chronically reactivating viruses, about defective mitochondria, about all the things that I read that were linked to chronic fatigue, but she just raised an eyebrow, looked at me like I was a hypochondriac and told me she knew nothing about those things. I remember walking out of the building feeling disheartened and defeated.
Yeah, it sounded like she really minimized his concerns and wasn't a total expert around the underlying scientific mechanisms to chronic fatigue. And they're treating the wrong thing. So even if she knew everything about it, it probably wouldn't help him because, again, Lyme's disease is totally different than chronic fatigue.
Things. I remember walking out of the building feeling disheartened and defeated, so much so that my legs buckled as I was walking home. I began to sob uncontrollably on the side of the road. An old woman knelt down to comfort me and asked me what was wrong. I didn't even really know how to explain, so I just told her that I missed my friend. Despite my skepticism, I stuck to the programme for at least half a year, and I kept going for my periodic visits to the clinic, and it did jack shit. In fact, I got worse. I was always getting worse. One thing that particularly struck me about the ME support groups was the pure desperation and confusion. With most other conditions, you're given a diagnosis, a prognosis of whether it's going to kill you, and what you can do to manage it or cure it. With ME, you don't get that. You get an indeterminately long sentence to purgatory. You feel worse than you've ever felt in your whole life, and you're given no explanation as to why, and no signpost pointing the way out. There was no selection bias to the people suffering. Members of the group were anything from esteemed ex-lawyers to single parents to former athletes. One thing I can say, these people were for the most part all extremely driven and collectively mourning their old lives. There's a stigma that because ME's predominant presentation of symptoms is tiredness, that its victims are just being lazy.
Right, and this is something that we see in all groups that are misunderstood. And I'm thinking back to, he mentioned AA. AA used to be a moral issue, and I grew up on the East Coast of the United States, and in Pennsylvania, the prison system there was under the assumption that addiction is a lack of willpower. If you're in active addiction, it's because you lack willpower. And we know absolutely that's not the case anymore. And this is what's happening with ME or chronic fatigue syndrome, is it gets labeled something derogatory because it's not well understood. And it does such damage to the people who are suffering from addiction or from ME, chronic fatigue syndrome. And that hurts them a lot. It disparages their reputation. It's effectively defamation.
ME's predominant presentation of symptoms is tiredness, that its victims are just being lazy. I can tell you firsthand that me and every single person I've met with genuine ME would rather run 1,000 marathons and have to live another week with the tiredness and the unrelenting fatigue. We were at war with our tiredness, trying desperately to escape it, and some of us would go to extreme lengths to turn ourselves into guinea pigs to try and find ways out. Suicide was pretty common in those online support groups. It was around this time I was swallowed into the music industry. I was out busking on the streets one day and I noticed this sketchy, good-looking Mauritian guy with his arms crossed watching me, really intensely, as though he was studying every lyric coming out of my mouth. He approached me and asked me if the songs I was singing were mine. I said they were, A big smile was painted across his face, and he told me he just finished recording Plan B's latest record, which turned out to be The Defamation of Strickland Banks, one of my favourite albums of all time. He was looking for a new project to sink his teeth into, and he asked me if I'd come to London to record.
Alright.
We got into it. The whole time I felt dreadful, but this was a lifelong dream materialising in front of my eyes. So bit by bit, when I could, I'd get the train to London and start chipping away at my first ever album. I didn't really let on how I was feeling during this time because I didn't want to sabotage it. There would be times I'd finish up in the vocal booth after doing a take, excuse myself to go to the toilet, throw up from the dizziness I was experiencing, sometimes with specks of blood, and then I'd go back and pretend that nothing had happened. I'd be sitting around with the whole room spinning and would pretend I was fine. There was only so long that I was able to keep this up. Eric told me it'd be a cool idea for me to start going to industry showcases and start building buzz. Performing live like this was a whole new level of taxing that I wasn't ready for, but I was so ferociously ambitious that I just ploughed through.
Wow, yeah, it's so hard when you are crippled by an illness, but you have a dream that you want to achieve, and the illness is holding you back from that. I mean, he is living such a facade and hiding what he's really going through. And I'm wondering if in his first album, if he drew any inspiration from the suffering, from the Lyme's disease, from all of the misdiagnosis and maltreatment from the healthcare industry, and used that as fuel for some of his lyrics and music.
The usual way it would go is I'd be in the back of Charlie's car, the whole world would be spinning, I'd be trying my best to sleep in it all day, parked up outside of whatever venue or pub it was in London, trying to conserve energy for the show. Sometimes I'd cry a little before I performed. My whole body would be burning. Then I'd brush it off and I'd get on stage and I'd perform as best I could. People would come up to me at the end, pat me on the back. I'd smile and pretend to be charismatic. Then I'd get back in the car and I wish I was in bed and have to endure a 3-hour drive back to Bath from London. There was only a few shows where I could keep pretending. I'd usually be trying to disguise the fact that my body was trembling through the fatigue and pain. Eventually I started crying mid-set. It became blindingly obvious to everyone working with me during that time that something was very wrong. I told Eric that I needed to take some time out. My plan was to live at home with my mum for a month maximum, get my energy back, and come and finish the record.
There is no shame in going to live with your parents in a mental health or physical health crisis. It is such a place of stability, depending on your parents, such a place of healing, to go back to your roots and really figure yourself out. And I've seen a lot of people really heal from going back home to live with their parents in a time of crisis. And I hope it helped REN here. We'll see.
Live at home with my mum for a month maximum, get my energy back, and come and finish the record. That 1 month turned into 2 months, turned into 3 months, turned into 6 months. I pushed myself to total burnout. The distance led to me and that angel breaking up, in part because it was difficult to navigate a relationship when you have so much brain fog, and I didn't know what it was well enough to be able to explain it to her at the time.
That really must hurt, that his deceased friend's cousin that he was dating, and just being so impaired that he can't maintain his music and his relationship with her. Yeah, that's tragic.
And I didn't know what it was well enough to be able to explain it to her at the time. With a loud thud, I'd been jolted out of a Shakespearean storyline. I lost the record deal and I couldn't get out of bed. My friends from Trick the Fox never really called to check up on me. It felt like the whole world was moving at lightning speed without me. I had this amazing opportunity right in front of me and I was chained to the floor. I was alone. I was sick. I wished that my condition would get it over with and kill me.
There are a lot of parallels here between his Lyme's disease and a lot of mental health conditions that I've seen and worked with people regarding, because it absolutely can feel like a disability, something that is crippling to the point where it takes away your relationships, takes away your job, takes away your passions, and makes you just a skeletal version of yourself living dormant, and like you're watching yourself live a fraction of the life you could live had you be healthy mentally or physically. And it's not just physical in his case either. He's having these mental health thoughts, the thoughts of suicide, thoughts of depression, thoughts of hopelessness, thoughts of helplessness. I mean, when you're tired, it's kind of like Fight Club. Once you're tired, you can't discern reality from delusion, and that line is so hard to walk.
But it wouldn't, and it felt cruel that it wouldn't. It just let me rot. in bed, the whole world would continue to turn and I would rot.
Wow.
In the next episode, I'm going to tell you about a fight with a television and losing my anal virginity to an 80-year-old man. Stay tuned for that.
What? Oh my goodness. Whew. I am very scared for this one. And notice how he smiles when he says that. This is something in therapy we call incongruent affect. When you're sharing something that's probably traumatic, but then you smile, or you have like an opposite physical response to something very scary. So people smile when they talk about their trauma, or laugh when they talk about something really horrific. And that's incongruent. And so I would love to explore that with Ren there, because it seems like, I'm assuming it was rape, but we'll see. I'm curious now. I'm like hanging on the edge of my seat. Holy smack. Wonder if that is related to his chronic fatigue syndrome.
In the next episode, I'm going to tell you about a fight with a television and losing my anal virginity to an 80-year-old man. Stay tuned for that.
Wow. Whew.
I'm Carmelo Anthony, and I'm here with David Yerman.
I got some
I've been making my
goosebumps
way
there.
as
I
long
was
as you
not
can remember.
expecting that.
Now it's your turn.
My thought patterns are composed by a time.
I can really hear the pain in his voice here.
My thought patterns are composed by a time bomb for an author, like pigs to the slaughter. A symphony of self-doubt sings out, breath starts getting shorter, running water. It's the state that I wish to become. Instead, concrete envelops my movement and I'm rendered deaf and dumb, unable to heed the advice of others.
Wow. Concrete makes him deaf and dumb. That is how his illness is feeling at this point. Oh my gosh. Like he is being smothered and all the weight of the world on him, to the point where he is completely helpless with the weight of the world on him.
It envelops my movement and I'm rendered deaf and dumb, unable to heed the advice of others. Don't tell me things will get better, cause so far things haven't gotten better. I've got the sweater, poster child, bipolar, ADHD, therapist, wet dream. I don't want to talk about my father, I don't want to talk about my dead friend, I don't want to talk about myself. I'm sick of talking about myself, I'm sick of talking about myself and realizing that talking about myself never ever helps. Still, I call for help, cause I really want help, but the pills didn't.
Wow. Oh, I'm getting emotional just listening to this. Because talking requires energy, and he doesn't have energy. He's in like a fraction, like say a tenth of the energy he would have completely healthy. And talking is such hard work emotionally, and he is over it. He has tried. He had 2 years of talk therapy, and this is the thing. Like people assume therapists can fix all their problems, but sometimes there are things outside of the therapist's scope. And Ren's case is one of them, where he has Lyme's disease. Therapists aren't trained to treat Lyme's disease, right? You need a medical doctor of osteopathy to help you manage those symptoms. And I'm so glad he finally found something that relieved his symptoms, like the stem cell injections and eating the keto diet. And it's so tragic when you go into a therapist's office with a medical condition and you think it's psychological, and then you get all of these differential diagnoses and you realize, wow, it's just medical. And yeah, it's so important to have a medical team, a clinical team, and get those different perspectives, because there's no one-size-fits-all approach in healthcare. You need to shop around different doctors, different therapists, find what's right for you.
I don't want to talk about my dead friend, I don't want to talk about myself. I'm sick of talking about myself, I'm sick of talking about myself and realizing that talking about myself never ever helps. Still, I call for help,
Don't give
because
up.
I really want help. But the pills didn't seem to help, and the therapist didn't seem to help. But still, I want help. I've danced with the devil in hell,
Love that.
I've sat in a prisonless cell, and here I always dwell, in this prison in my soul.
Wow.
I do this thing.
I love that. dwelling in a prison of your own creation. And we all limit ourselves to some extent. We're not full-fledged, optimized potential people because we're constantly learning, constantly getting better. And we all have self-limiting beliefs. And that's why therapy can help people even without mental illnesses or mental health struggles, because it can help you set goals, be better at your job, be better with your family, be a better friend, all of these things. And I've worked with some highly functioning people who are out there making real change in the world, being a great father, being a great husband to their family. And sometimes therapy is just a space for you to be however you want. And so often in the world we're conformed in these roles where we can't always be ourselves.
Want help? I've danced with the devil in hell. I've sat in a prisonless cell, and here I always dwell, in this prison in myself.
Yeah.
I do this thing where my mind travels back to the golden age. You know those times where you were carefree and everything was golden? The golden age. You know those times where everything was golden, where you were carefree and everything was golden? The hardest thing I ever had to do was come to terms with the fact that that time never really existed.
Woo! Right. When we romanticize something in our brain, we change that memory 1% to 2% each time. So we can create these fantasies in our mind just by remembering the positive of a certain relationship or a certain time in our life. And then it becomes delusional if you remember that 100 times, because that memory is then completely altered.
I've always felt so fucking detached and broken, bruised and mismatched. Find it hard to relax, living under the cracks. Tried to fill in the gaps, lying here on my back. Still, I can't find it. Sense of peace in my mind declined it. Pulse increase and my sweat combines with a feeling so deep I fall inside it. Depression, I hate you. Depression, your constant oppression. Respond with aggression. They say depression.
Oh my gosh. The depression leads to aggression for him. And we know clinically that anger is a secondary emotion. And so think of anger and aggression as kind of like the bouncer in a bar guarding something. And it guards, in his case, his depression, his sadness, his self-defeating beliefs. And so we know that if someone's acting angry, they're likely coming from a more hurt place somewhere deep down.
Constant oppression, respond with aggression. They say depression brings you lessons. Constant stressing conceals blessings. You will grow in broken settings. Fuck those lessons, fuck depression. I've been living in your shadow.
The pain in his voice. He is fed up with those people telling him that he'll be thankful for it, because he's hating it right now.
For so long that I forgot how I can shine, how I can find a refuge in my mind, how am I meant to sit here and unwind? The planets align, I feel like I'm cursed, feel like I'm cursed to just be here to hurt, feel like I'm cursed to just be here to bleed, but my demons been feeling this way since birth. Depression, I hate you. 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 Depression, I hate you.
Wow. How emotional is that? Oh my goodness, I'm tearing up listening to that. Whoo! And I love there at the end how he says, I hate you, aggression, so kind of seriously, and then it transitioned to his sadness and his underlying emotion to his aggression and to his anger. And that is ultimately the pain, the physical pain, the mental pain, the misdiagnoses, the inexhaustible feeling of being, so sleep deprived. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's a rough video. I love how he incorporates these songs and makes something beautiful from the suffering, even though in the moment he wants to give up, he wants to quit. And I love, how he incorporates Joe, his friend who killed himself, into these videos. And yeah, what an incredible chapter 3. I am speechless for once, because that was so powerful. And I never know what song is going to come up on these, so I am just taken away by his artistic ability. What an incredible chapter 3. We'll be listening to the rest of the chapters coming up in the next few weeks. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share this with a friend. Helps me out a lot. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Music Therapy.